Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we get into all things related to self-care with an extra dose of courage. So when I say self-care, I think it conjures up usually ideas of spa days with cucumbers over your eyes and pedicures and manicures. And that is definitely a kind of self-care, but it is just so much more broad than that. There is so much more to self-care. Part of it is taking care of our bodies for sure. And then part of it is going beyond and what is inside, going into the unknown, figuring out what is holding us back, getting clarity on what we are destined for, how to become the next best version of ourselves. To me, that is the whole shebang. That is self-care in all directions. And that gets me really excited because self-care, when we're practicing self-care that requires courage, we are growing. And it feels so good to grow and for things to evolve. That is the nature of the universe. It's expansion, and that is what we are meant to do too. And courageous self-care, I find, is a great package on how to express ourselves in all those ways that we are longing to do. This might sound complicated. And it is. That's why I've been working on creating 12 skill sets of courageous self-care over the last 3 years. I am here for you as a guide, giving you ideas and strategic action. And I also love to have other guides join me on the show so that, number one, it's not just me doing all the work by myself. And number two, so that we get new perspectives. So today I have Borin Miller. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Christina. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here, Lisa. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you are up to these days.
Well, I'm an artist and designer and entrepreneur and very inspired by practices of consciousness in my work. So right now I'm particularly interested in feng shui as a way of kind of merging the inner and outer worlds and creating harmony between those two spheres of our lives. And I really like to use my creativity to help people access the sort of their soul calling, or how they like to put themselves out there in the world through their space or their design. Often I also work with branding clients. And so for me, that harmony between the way things look and the way things feel and our purpose should all come together. And when they do, that for me is kind of the true meaning of creativity and beauty.
You said that beautifully. I'm all inspired. That's because you're using words that I really resonate with, like harmony. I think harmony is such a beautiful ideal. And when we are in pursuit of harmony, it's so much kinder than the pursuit of balance. So that's a whole thing. I just wrote a chapter in my book about that. But I love the idea of finding harmony between the inner and the outer worlds. And you're so right. When things are beautiful and creative and stimulating around us, it works both ways. It both stimulates us to behave that way, and it calls on us to be more like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I think beauty can be a tool for consciousness and a tool to create that harmony. Or without that inner piece, which is crucial, it can also be a distraction, something that we focus on to move out of ourselves instead of into ourselves.
That's a great point. Absolutely. And the other thing that you were talking about that I love the idea of is self-expression and creativity. And those are both parts of courageous self-care as well, because it takes courage to fully express yourself. It's easy to be neutral or to not speak your mind, not contribute to conversation. And when we physicalize that and put that in to express ourselves, either in the way that we dress or present ourselves, or in the space, or how we represent ourselves online, it's an expression of what's happening on the inside, and it can help us become more clear on who we are on the inside as well.
Definitely. I think so. I think those are great points. And I think one of the things that I'm often saying to clients, especially if they are branding clients, is that it really does take courage to share those soul aspects, which it's not always that common to do in society when we're thinking about branding or putting ourselves out there. But my belief is that when we share from that vulnerable soul place and express ourselves visually or verbally from that place, that we attract back the things that we're meant to, and we put out the gifts that we're meant to.
I totally agree. This is all very exciting. I love it. So Lisa, thank you for sharing all of that. I just love the depth of what you are creating and how you work with people. One thing I love to do on the show is to get guests to share their current favorite self-care practice. And before you do that, I feel like this is important because having an expanded awareness of what self-care actually is super helpful. Sometimes people are doing things without presence, but it could be self-care if they were adding that deeper element to it. And other times we just get ideas on, oh, I didn't think of that as a self-care practice. I would love to try that. And so the more drops we put into this bucket of courageous self-care, the more there is to choose from. So what's something that you love to do for yourself that really fills you up?
Well, it's so hard to choose one, but I'll give you a couple examples of things that are really nourishing to me. So one is being outside in nature. I feel like if I do a walk every day, I'm outside, it's totally refreshing for me. It's a time of connection. So that's one simple one. And another one that requires a little more inner work is I have a really regular committed meditation practice and a yoga practice, but I've recently, and I love Kundalini yoga, it's my go-to, but there's one way of meditating that I've been using more and more, which is simple, and I think anyone can try. And that's simply just sitting with myself and allowing what is to be, and trying to just work to that inner space of safety and peace. And so allowing, especially in the times of turbulence or discomfort or stress, coming to that home place inside. And I think, Christina, that this is where, to be honest, my interest in home and space comes from. Because I think that home, in the truest sense of the word, really is that safe space inside. And so when we can get there in meditation, we can know then what feels right for us out in the world too. We have a comparison point for what that true nourishing place should feel like. And so my work might be, I usually set aside 20 minutes to try and practice letting go of the thoughts, accepting the feelings, and just bringing my awareness into what feels like that home safe place for me in meditation.
It sounds so inviting.
It is.
Well, you gave some really great reasons on why a person would want to meditate. And, but I want to first go back to getting outside and going for a walk in nature. So you said you do that every day, and I'm curious how you make that happen, because sometimes people get into a habit, myself included, of it's just really easy to stay inside. And especially in our variable climate, some days it is not appealing in the outdoors, or you need to put on a whole bunch of layers. So I'm curious, is your daily walk something that you do without fail, or is it something that varies, or how does that work for you?
Well, my daily walk is pretty much without fail. There may be the odd day when I skip it, but I have some really incredible motivating forces, which are my 2 spaniels.
Yes.
And they give me lots of prompting. So if I'm hanging out at the table and I put it off, Oliver will come over and stare at me until I'm willing. So I think about him as like he's an expression of the divine that motivates me into better self-care and commitment. Because if I don't want to do it, he's there saying like, come on, I'm ready. And part of what I love about my walks, like I like going on my own, but when I take the 2 dogs, I get to see joy in motion without fail. Like they're so exuberant and they're just these pure expressions of enthusiasm and joy. And so that lights me up too. It's easy to stay more present when I can witness that in them.
You make a really important point, Lisa. When we have a habit or we have a desired habit that we know will nourish us, sometimes what it takes is having an external force to make that happen. Mm-hmm. So I know when I used to walk my kids to school when they were younger, I went outside no matter what, and twice a day to go get them and to take them there. And it just was seamless in my day. And then I noticed a real shift when they started walking themselves. I had to create this, oh, yes, I haven't been outside yet today. Now I need to find a reason beyond that's going to motivate me to put on all the layers or to tear myself away from my work that I love so much. And getting a dog is a great example of, like, that can be a reason for why you would get a dog, is if you're feeling called to be more connected with nature, but you just can't make yourself do it. Having something like a spaniel staring up at you until you take action. Even just getting a dog is a form of self-care, right?
Totally. Like there's no one that will give you a better greeting. This is like my little promo for dogs now, because I'm such a dog. There's no one that will give you a better, more welcoming greeting than dogs when you come home, and like to make you feel worthwhile, because they don't care what you've done or what you do right or that you judge as right or wrong or anything. They just love you no matter what, unconditionally. And I think they're a mirror for that part of ourselves that we're all striving to get to, that unconditional love for ourselves. And they give that to you every day. So promo for dogs.
Yeah. Dogs. And then I'm also curious about your meditation practice. So are there ever times when you don't feel like doing it? And what do you, if there are, because I know for me, with meditation, I do it daily, and every day there is a voice that says, well, I'll do it later. Well, I don't think I need to do it. Well, I don't know. So does that happen to you, or have you made it such a habit that it's just ingrained?
It does happen to me, and I approach it differently, like depending on the practice. So in my Kundalini yoga practice, which I'm also a teacher of, it's common to adopt a certain meditation for a specific purpose for a period of time. And if I'm doing that, so a common practice would be 40 days, 90 days, 120 days, or 1,000 days. And if I have made that commitment to myself, without fail, I do it no matter what, like in the car, on the airplane, like in a public bathroom, not really, but wherever it happens. But with my other practice, the one that I was describing, which is more of a mindfulness-based practice, I'm a little more gentle with myself. I do it every single day, but I don't require the same structure of myself. So, for example, it may be first thing in the morning before I get out of bed. I like to set a timer and come to my meditation chair, but I'm not as rigid about it with that. Yeah.
I think oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Christina. I was just going to say, and then in those difficult moments, the more that I've made it a practice, the easier it is to get there in the difficult moments. If something comes up, no matter where I am, it's easier to drop in.
Mm-hmm. I think getting started on these habits that we want to create is the hardest, because we don't have it. It literally has to do with your brain and the neural pathways and the amount of myelin that's wrapped around those pathways. I learned all about it in a fantastic book called The Talent Code. And the more myelin we have, the surrounding fiber of those neural pathways. I'm explaining it with my hands, but of course you can't see it in audio. But the more myelin you have wrapped around these neural pathways, the more skill you have. And overcoming the great trickster in your mind that doesn't want you to do hard stuff, that's a skill. And so you're right. The more we commit to something and know that it's important, the easier it is over time to overcome those voices. Yeah. Yeah. And those protests.
Yes. And definitely. And I think especially with those Kundalini meditations, they literally are designed to help transform the mind and the nervous system, and they require the diligence of every day in order to do that deep work. They need that commitment of every single day. And so I think it's always a good idea as a starting place to make that commitment to yourself that doesn't give you an out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that comes from making a decision, essentially. That's what is at the core of creating new habits and sticking with them, is just making the decision.
Yeah. And I think, it's my belief that these are all things like we've kind of touched on, but that are just practices for life. They're the moments that we are able to develop the discipline and the character and commitment to then continue when challenges in life come up that could throw us off our path or our calling, that we've now developed the discipline to continue on, to go to those challenging places and to meet them with that courage. And I think that that's why it's all useful, only because it serves us in our life.
Yeah, that's a great point. I just read a quote that I'm not going to say exactly right, but it's from John Wooden, who is an exceptional coach, I think, in the basketball world. And the quote was something like, "The time to prepare for a challenge is not when the challenge shows up. You want to prepare ahead of time." And that is a great reason that you have explained about why you're doing these meditation practices.
Yeah, I think I love that quote. I the idea that you brought up. I mean, I think that's such a great way of putting it.
Well, I didn't come up with it. I did paraphrase it nicely.
You did. You paraphrased it really nicely.
And the last thing I want to touch on before we go to our quick break is 1,000-day meditation. How long is that?
Almost 3 years.
Oh my gosh, have you done one of those?
I'm working through one. Yes, I do. I'm working through 1,000-day practice, and lots of people in the Kundalini tradition do this at least one point in their lives. And I'm just fortunate that the one that I picked, because a lot of these meditations can be really physically challenging, like with a lot of breath work, but I'm so grateful. The one that kind of spoke to me several times over and over is so gentle and so nurturing, and it's listening to one of my very favorite mantras and hands on the heart. Just really nurturing and gentle for the self. So it's not work for me to do it every day. And that's the thing about the 1,000-day practice. They say that you can easily get through a 40-day, 90-day, 120 practice with your will. But the only thing that will carry you in a 1,000-day practice is devotion.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I read a book called Meditation as Medicine, and it's full of Kundalini practices that a doctor, he used to prescribe a lot of drugs to his patients, and he was just disillusioned with the whole medical system. But he had a background and practice of Kundalini yoga, and so he started prescribing those instead of drugs, and he found that his results skyrocketed. So I read this book, and there's diagrams and explanations on how to do everything, and there was one breathing practice towards the end, one Kundalini meditation, and it looked like, he said it was a very precious meditation, and what he meant by that was really challenging. So I thought, I can do that. And I was shocked at how I could not sustain the breath and movement for 30 seconds, not even 10. It was so hard. But okay, I probably need to work my way up to this precious meditation.
Yeah, Kundalini instructors have a way of doing that. My students know that when I say fun, they're like, oh, that's what you meant by fun.
You went really hard and sweating in seconds and being challenged beyond what I was ready for.
But that's the beauty of the commitment, because then when you do it, like you'll notice after a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, what you can do has expanded exponentially, and you will rise to the occasion. So revisit it.
Okay. I'll come back. I'll look for that precious meditation again.
Yeah, good.
All right. We're going to get into your story of courage, which I'm so excited to hear. In just a moment, we're going to pause for a quick commercial break, and we will be right back. We're back, and so are you. Yay, the party can continue. Thank you for sticking around. So I love to get guests to share their story, well, one of their stories of courage, because we are all full of multitudes of such examples. One of the reasons I love to hear stories of courage is because stories are just a really great way for us to learn. Human beings crave stories, and you can go through all these steps of how to be courageous, but I think it has so much more impact and brings the awareness of courage and the energy of courage from the outside of us more to the inside of us when we hear stories. So Lisa, what is the story of courage from your life that you've chosen to share with us today?
Well, I am going to share with you a little bit about a time in my life when I was transitioning from being basically newly, I just met my husband, who actually wasn't my husband at the time. We were dating, and we were ready to sort of start a shared path together, and we weren't sure where we were going to go. And ultimately, it led us to where I currently live in Camrose, Alberta, someplace I'd never even heard of, doing a business that I never imagined I would ever be running. So that's kind of the story that I thought I would tell.
Beautiful. So tell us a little bit about why it took courage for you to do that.
Okay, so if I rewind, the beginning of this story is that when I had met my husband, I was really on this path to create my life in a way that felt right to me. I'd recognized that I am co-creating my life with the universe, and in order to do that, I would like to have a certain amount of freedom in my life. And I started this thing called Project 108, Gestures for Creative Community Building. And it was a way of transforming my art practice into acts of gratitude and love and creative community building. And so my husband and I, who wasn't my husband at the time, we were traveling around and we were really ready to put down some roots, and we didn't know where we would go. And so we put this prayer out to the universe, which is how we often ask for guidance. That's part of our belief, is that we're always guided. And so I put this prayer out and said, where should we go and where should we serve? And we were very open about the answer that would come back. And so we came out to Camrose and we did a workshop here, and everybody joked because my husband I wasn't teaching yoga at the time, but my husband was. And everybody joked and said, oh, we really need a Kundalini teacher in Camrose. And I thought, like, this place has this beautiful energy about it. There was something about Camrose that had a really special, just such a special vibration to it, and really reminded me of some of my favorite places. And so I said to my husband, I think there's something really special about Camrose. And he said, well, I just don't understand. Like, it's kind of a small town. Like, I don't really know what we would do there. And so we left, and gradually all of these signs started coming, saying, basically pointing to Camrose. Like, it was on the front page of the Calgary Herald.
Oh gosh.
A couple of days later, we came and we looked at a house, and it just so happened that we sort of fell in love with this little house, and it was in our price range, and all these things started lining up. And so then I thought, okay, I'm understanding there's this guidance to go to Camrose, but what on earth am I going to do there? Like, I was really starting to get scared about making this leap to a place where we didn't know anyone, where didn't really have any big thing drawing me there. And being newly self-employed, I wasn't sure what I would do for work here. And so I said a prayer this morning before we were gonna, not today, but that particular morning, about guidance, wanting guidance. So I said, okay, I'm willing to go to Camrose, but I need a sign about what I will do there. And so my husband got in touch with me, my boyfriend at the time, and he said, I just wanted you to know that I heard from Sandy, who was our friend who owned the yoga studio. And she had this dream last night that you and I took over the yoga studio, and it was very divine.
Wow.
And so I said, I'm willing to go, and I'm willing to do this, and I'm willing to run this business. And there was definitely a lot of resistance in me into making this leap and taking on this home, which we renovated top to bottom, lots of hard work on our own, and taking on a business, which I'd never done before. But the way that I was able to find courage was through praying for the signs, because I often, I know that we all have places of fear and resistance and ego, which always wants to help, but sometimes is afraid. And so I really trust in the power of prayer, and those messages from the universe that turn up for me as synchronicities. And so that's how I was able to find the courage to move forward.
Lisa, what you're talking about that so resonates is one of the courageous self-care skill sets, which is learning to access and trust and then follow and act on your intuition. And I love the act of asking for signs also. I think it's such a fun way to interact with spirit and to get guidance. And it's like a treasure hunt. It's so stimulating. And then when you get the signs, it's often not in the way that you anticipated. And I've taught my kids about asking for signs. And my daughter said one day, "Mommy, I asked for a sign about a bumblebee and one just flew and hit me into the forehead. Do you think that's a sign?"
I
said, "Yeah, that's pretty clear."
That's awesome.
So, could you explain a little bit the process of asking for a sign and then how you receive it for someone who's never done that before?
Sure. So I would say that I think it's really important to trust your intuition when choosing a sign, so you might start by asking, what would be a good sign for me? So for me, there are a couple like really clear things like, feathers or quarters in particular. I know if I find a quarter, especially if it's at a really key moment, like that's for me really clear. So everybody, I think, has their own special language about what that is. So I think you have to ask intuition, what's the sign for me? And show me, reveal it. And maybe it'll come as just a knowing, or maybe it'll be stumble on something on the sidewalk and you think, that's kind of unusual. And that's probably your sign.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I hadn't heard that part of it before, so that's very helpful. I just make up signs and I make them as outlandish as possible. Like once I asked for a sign about seeing a butterfly in an airport.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And sure enough, I saw butterflies on one of the advertising screens, like 9 butterflies flying across the screen.
Wow. I love that. I'm going to have to get creative with this now.
Yeah, it is fun. I was thinking about, I knew the question I was going to ask, and I was thinking, what would be really, I want the answer right away, and I'm going to be in an airport, and I want the answer by the time I leave on the airplane. So what would be something that would be really unusual? I thought, rainbows. No, that's too easy. Unicorns. I don't know about that. And then butterfly came into my mind, and sure enough, there they were. And admittedly, I was really looking for them because it just shows that I really already knew the answer, but I wanted a sign just for security.
I love that. That's such a great story.
Yeah, the full story is in my book that I'm currently working on. Anyways, Lisa, thank you for sharing your story of courage and giving us some tips on how to follow intuition. That's super helpful and very interesting. And I'm so glad that you landed up where you were guided and that things have been unfolding ever since then. So I'm sure people are going to be interested in connecting with you and learning how to find that harmony between the inner and outer world. If that is resonating for you, dear listeners, Lisa, how can they find you online?
They can find me on my website, so lisaborinmiller.com. And I've got a couple of fun resources there on my resources page. There's a Vision Awakening guidebook and an intro to Feng Shui, which you could use at home. And I also have a blog on there too.
Excellent. So please do check out Lisa's stuff, because I know Lisa is just fantastic and coming from such a beautiful, heartfelt place. And the resources are complimentary. So do go access those and take a look, especially Feng Shui. I think Feng Shui is so exciting and interesting, and it's so impactful. The art of arranging your belongings in your space can make such a tremendous difference. Lisa, thank you so much for taking time to share your energy with us and your wisdom and your stories. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Christina. It's been such a joy.
I agree. And listeners all over the world, thank you for listening. Every time you listen, you are taking a step towards being more courageous, practicing deeper, more whole self-care. And that is such a beautiful mission, because the more you prioritize your own well-being, it's not just for you. You benefit, of course, but then everyone in your immediate surrounding benefits, because your energy is so much more grounded and peaceful, and you just feel so much more alive, and you can give from a place of love. And then energetically, it's also rippling out into the world and having a huge impact on the vibration of the world and even the universe as a whole. So obviously there's nothing selfish in that. You have full permission to take excellent care of yourself. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks again for being here, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks, Christina.
You're so welcome. And if you enjoyed it, please give the episode a like, or share it with a friend, or leave a comment, or leave a review on iTunes if you're listening there. Become a follower, and that way we can amplify the message and get it out to as many women around the world. Thanks for listening. I look forward to connecting with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.